Good morning, brothers and sisters. Welcome to the last of this week's studies. As we return to this portion of the book of Daniel and continue looking at the verses that are contained herein, shall we ask our Heavenly Father for his direction and his guidance so that we might more clearly understand that which we need to understand for this time in Earth's history. Shall we now ask for his guidance in prayer? Gracious Father in heaven, we thank you for these opportunities that we've had to be able to study this week. We ask, Father, for your continued blessing and for your Spirit to join with us so that our minds might be open to that which we need to understand. Please bless our time together. Guide us so that we might understand that which is written in the word of truth and consider that which Uriah Smith had written many years ago. Help us now, Father. Direct us in these paths. Help us together to join together. May your will be done. May your angels attend us. May this conversation and this study be fruitful. For this, Father, we thank you. For this, we praise you. In Jesus' name, amen. So now, we've covered this in verse 14 in different ways this week. And I think we're fairly understanding that at this point that we are looking at a group that would come against the king of the south, and that the robbers of thy people, or the children of the robbers of thy people, shall exalt themselves to establish the daily and the transgression of desolation, the calzone, but they shall fall. Now in this portion, Smith has written that Antiochus was not the only one who rose up against the infant Ptolemy. Agathocles, his prime minister, having possession of the king's person and conducting the affairs of the kingdom in his stead, was so dissolute and proud in the exercise of his power that the provinces which before were subject to Egypt rebelled. Egypt itself was disturbed by seditions, and the people of Alexandria rose up against him, causing his sister, his mother, and their associates to be put to death. At the same time, Philip, king of Macedon, entered into a league with Antiochus to divide the dominions of Ptolemy between them, each proposing to take parts which lay nearest and most convenient to him. Here was a rising up against the king of the south, sufficient to fulfill the prophecy, and the very events beyond doubt which the prophecy intended. Now, if I'm reading Smith correctly, he believes that this prophecy began and ended before Christ was born. Would we agree with that?
Yeah. This is happens before Christ is born, because this is pagan Rome.
You know, the point that the way he's writing this, that it begins and it ends, that there is no further fulfillment.
Well, I see. Well, I don't know if that's quite what he's saying. I mean, he's just looking at the historical application, if that's what you're saying.
Well, let's continue then. A new power is now introduced. The robbers of thy people literally says Bishop Newton, the breakers of thy people. Far away on the banks of the Tiber, a kingdom has been nourishing itself with ambitious projects and dark designs. Small and weak at first, it grew with marvelous rapidity in strength and vigor, reaching out cautiously here and there to try its prowess and test the vigor of its warlike arm, till, conscious of its power, it boldly reared its head among the nations of the earth, and seized with invincible hand the helm of their affairs. Henceforth the name of Rome stands upon the historic page, destined for long ages to control the affairs of the world and exert a mighty influence among the nations, even to the end of time.
Yeah, so he's not saying that Rome doesn't have to have anything to do with end time prophecy. Now, just a little point here. Remember, we looked at the start of Rome, which is 753 BC. That's the traditional date given for the beginning of the Roman kingdom as far as tradition is concerned, Roman tradition. And we noticed that was 1290 years prior to 538. So just a reminder of that. So just reminded me, well, because he's talking about first that this kingdom rises, far away on the banks of the Tiber.
Right.
So it just reminded me of the beginning of Rome. So it's interesting that he does mention this. Yeah. So and of course, it's kind of weird because Bishop Newton says the breakers of thy people, but they don't put in the children of the breakers of thy people or anything like that, or the sons, which is what it actually says. Which we noted that when you add that together, you get 7651, the children of the breakers. And that's the number that's in Leviticus 26 for the number 7 times. So this definitely does refer to that, so the Kazone, and this prophetic period relating to the 7 times, which is the 2520.
Now,
so lots in there.
As you are so aptly pointing out. Yes, William?
I looked up the Hebrew word for the Hebrew number for robbers, and it's 6530. I think it is. It's mentioned 3 times, but I think they give a meaning that says destroyers.
Okay, your Hebrew 6530.
That's right.
I agree with you. And there are 6 verses that involve this particular word. Now, rule of first mention would take us back to Psalm 17:4. Concerning the works of men, by the word of thy lips, I have kept me from the path of the destroyer. Isaiah 35:9, no lion shall be there, nor any ravenous beast. So the word is translated from destroyer to ravenous. Shall go up thereupon, it shall not be found there, but the redeemed shall walk there. Jeremiah 7:11, and all subsequent verses translate this as robbers. Is this house which is called by my name become a den of robbers in your eyes? Behold, even I have seen it, saith the Lord. But I find it most interesting that these robbers that we're referring to here would also be expressed in Ezekiel 7:22 and Ezekiel 18:10. My face will I turn also from them, and they shall pollute my secret place, for the robbers shall enter into it and defile it. Along with, if he beget a son that is a robber, a shedder of blood, that doeth the like to any one of these things. Now, the robbers of thy people, or the margin reading, the children of the robbers of thy people. How do we address this? I'm not seeing breakers as Smith is quoting this Bishop Newton. So where would this come from?
It doesn't translate into the King James as breakers, but he's just going back to the Hebrew, saying that the idea of somebody breaking in.
Okay.
Right. That's the idea of the Hebrew word, like break and entering. Right. So, so it's interesting in Ezekiel 7, because this is talking about these judgments that are going to come upon Israel by Babylon, right? And if you think about the sons of the destroyers of thy people, which I don't know why children, but sons would be the literal translation. It could really describe that these are the descendants, because we know that Rome inherits the characteristic of Babylon, right? Which is that 666 symbol.
Okay.
So we could just say that Rome is the son of Babylon, right? Of these nations that it conquers. The descendants, not literally, like genetically, but as far as this line of Babylon, Media, Persia, Greece, and Rome, and that would fit into, the idea that this is the daily. Does that make sense?
I'm not disagreeing that.
Yeah, that this is paganism, and that's the reason why it says the sons of the destroyers or the sons of the robbers, whatever you want to use, because it's referring to the fact that this is this continuation of Babylon, Media, Persia, and Greece. So Rome, in exalting itself to establish the vision, is the continuation of this line of these kingdoms of that we see in Daniel 2, but also in Daniel 7. So that's the way I would address that. But rather than that they're just the descendants of the Romans, right? That doesn't really make sense.
Well, I took a notice to that Jeremiah 7:11 and Ezekiel 7:22. It has the 22 and 11 in it. That's what I was looking at when I was looking up them verses.
Yeah.
Okay. Now on the other side, I've looked at this, the children of the robbers of thy people, the sons of the robbers of thy people, whether or not this could have a present truth application as pointing toward apostate Protestantism.
Yeah, but we had taken, because we had gone through that a number of times, so we still take the position that in the present truth application, the way that we've drawn it up, that this is referring to the papacy.
Right.
In the present truth, not to apostate Protestantism. So the way that we have put it, because we're saying that in those times, that is the Civil War from the first day of the first month in 2024 to the first day of the first month in 2030 is 2,187 days. There shall many, republicanism in the USA is going to be represented by Philip V, King of Macedon, and Antiochus III. Stand up is they have all of this propaganda against the King of the South, against Biden and the Democrats. Then we have the 777 structure is represented because of adding sons of the robbers, getting that Sheba, and the robbers of thy people are papacy. They shall exalt themselves. Right, that is, the papacy supports wokeism to establish the vision. And in this case, it's the vision from 1989 to the Sunday Law. They shall fall, close of probation, and 7 last plagues. And the thing is that, just to remember that we have the fall of pagan Rome, 476 AD pagan Rome to 1798 papal Rome. So there's this two different falls, the fall of pagan Rome, the fall of papal Rome. So we do have papal Rome in there, that's prefigured, they shall fall, that pagan Rome falls and papal Rome falls. But we in our present truth application, this has been more about, because the papacy has to be represented in some way, because the power that it's fighting against in this battle of the King of the North and the King of the South is battling against the Protestants in the United States. This is a battle, and the papacy is now going to support wokeism, that it supports Egypt, right? And we have seen that happen, right? The papacy has been supporting Egypt, not supporting Protestant America.
Correct.
But the republicanism, right? They're going to support the Democrats, the woke America. So there's that battle that's going on. That's how we made the present truth application. It's about this civil war going on in the United States. But whether that's correct or not, that's how we did it. Right? So the sons of the breakers, the idea is that this is the papacy.
Okay. Now, Smith continued, Rome spoke, and Syria and Macedonia soon found a change coming over the aspect of their dream. The Romans interfered in behalf of the young king of Egypt, determined that he should be protected from the ruin devised by Antiochus and Philip. This was BC 200 and was one of the first important inferences of the Romans into the affairs of Syria and Egypt. Rollin furnishes the following succinct account of this matter. Antiochus, king of Syria, and Philip, king of Macedonia, during the reign of Ptolemy Philopator, had discovered the strongest zeal for the interest of that monarch, and were ready to assist him on all occasions. Yet no sooner was he dead, leaving behind an infant, whom the laws of humanity and justice enjoined them not to disturb in the possession of his father's kingdom, than they immediately joined in a criminal alliance and excited each other to shake off the lawful heir and divide his dominions between them. Philip was to have Cabria, Libya, Cyrenicia, and Egypt, and Antiochus all the rest. With this view, the latter entered into Coele-Syria and Palestine, and in less than 2 campaigns made an entire conquest of the 2 provinces, with all their cities and dependencies. Their guilt, said Polybius, would not have been quite so glaring had they, like tyrants, endeavored to gloss over their crimes with some specious pretense. But so far from doing this, their injustice and cruelty were so barefaced that to them was applied what is generally said of fishes, that the larger ones, though of the same species, prey on the lesser. One would be tempted, continues the same author, at seeing the most sacred laws of society so openly violated, to accuse Providence of being indifferent and insensible to most horrid crimes. But it is fully justified his conduct by punishing these 2 kings according to their deserts, and made such an example of them as ought, in all succeeding ages, to deter others from following their conduct. For while they are meditating to dispossess a weak and helpless infant of his kingdom, by piecemeal, Providence raised up the Romans against them, who entirely subverted the kingdoms of Philip and Antiochus, and reduced their successors to almost as great of calamities as those with which they intended to crush the infant king. I find it interesting that Rome was raised up to defend the king of the south in this case. And yet, by the early part of the 7th century AD, Islam is being raised up to defend Protestantism against Rome, or at least run interference for them. Any thoughts?
I don't understand what you're trying to say here.
I do. And
Okay.
yeah, it's interesting how God can use our enemies to defend us. Like, if I get you right there, Dwight, you're referring to the men of the East keeping the scriptures safe,
Well, we got the men of the East
and also distracting the armies of Rome when they were about to have the victory over the Protestants.
Both correct. What I'm looking at here are these 2 kings, Philip and Antiochus. As long as one somewhat of an equal was on the throne, they left Egypt alone. The moment that there is an infant under the care of others, they want to carve up the kingdom.
Okay. And then we got Rome coming in to protect Egypt.
Correct.
Right, which is why we say that that's kind of what happened with in the U.S. as there was this, during the time of Trump, particularly, that Rome comes in and supports the Democrats. But I don't know. I'm not quite sure if I still fully understand that. But anyway, I'm going to have to think about it.
Okay. Now,
because next we're going to have the Battle of Pneum, right? So,
well, Smith is referring to this in about 200 BC. The Battle of Pneum took place when?
Well, that's around 200. So the Battle of Pneum is going to be connected to all of that, and that's where I'm trying to figure out, because we got Raphi and Pneum, right? So this is interjected, verse 14, in this context of period between November 9th, 2019 and July 18, 2020, Raphi and Pneum, right? So because in 1111, right, we're going to have the Battle of Raphia, right? And then when verse 13, this is addressing the Battle of Pneum, right? And so that's going to be finally resolved here by the time we get to, I guess I'm trying to look ahead in these verses, right? So, yeah, so finally you get this Sunday law happening, like in verse 16, but he that cometh against him shall do according to his own will, and none shall stand before him, and he shall stand in the glorious land which by his hand shall be consumed. So this is just describing what's also described in chapter 11, verse 40 to 45, right? So that's the interesting thing about it, is that these verses that talk about historically the Battle of Raphi and the Battle of Peniam are typifying what happens in Daniel 11, verse 40 to 45, which we already sort of understood, right?
Okay.
We had made that application, but we didn't see that it's so clearly represented in these verses. But within these verses themselves, they have this repeat of history, right? That is, when we made an application of Raphia and Peniam to Daniel 11, verse 40 to 45, right, to that history, when the movement had done that back in 2016, the end of 2016, the beginning of 2017, what we didn't, what we thought we were doing is just seeing an application of these verses, as if we were looking at those verses and now just taking the present truth application out of them that wasn't necessarily directly there, but we can see it actually is there, right? It is these within the book of Daniel itself, within Daniel 11 itself, it's taking these verses and repeating the history, right? That is, Daniel 11, verse 40 to 45 is a repeat of history of what happened earlier in Daniel 11, 11 to 16. And that I don't think we had seen so clearly before. This is where God declares the end from the beginning. He is doing it in Daniel chapter 11, if that makes sense. I'm not explaining myself well, but hopefully people see what I mean by that. Raphi and Peniam already are meant to typify Daniel 11, verse 40. For instance, we say Daniel 11, verse 40a is Raphia, and Daniel 11, verse 40b is Peniam. And so we see that. The king of the south coming against the king of the north, right? And then the king of the north coming against the king of the south. And so it's already built in, not something that we just are applying. It is part of the prophecy.
Okay. Now, the Battle of Raphia took place roughly 17 years prior to the Battle of Peniam. The Battle of Raphia is Ptolemy Philopator coming against Antiochus and his assembled forces. And the Battle of Raphia is the one where Ptolemy wins, Antiochus loses, and it sets the stage for Ptolemy thinking that he has gained a great victory. Now, Smith continues to establish the vision, in quotes. The Romans being more prominently than any other people the subject of Daniel's prophecy, their first interference in the affairs of these kingdoms is here referred to as being the establishment or the demonstration of the truth of the vision which predicted the existence of such a power. So here we have some situations. Rome was founded in 753 BC. We have the Battle of Peniam in 217, but Rome is not a factor in this, right? This occurs between Ptolemy, king of Egypt, Antiochus, the king basically of Syria.
Yeah, you're saying that Rome's not involved in the Battle of Peniam.
Correct.
Okay, so, well, they are sort of...
Excuse me, they're not involved in Raphia.
Oh, yeah, they're not involved in Raphia. They are involved in Peniam. Right?
Correct.
Because they in there. And we know, of course, part of our application that we have made is that we've narrowed this down. The application that we've focused on has to do with what has happened within the movement as far as the prediction dealing with Trump and also with July 18th. Right. So this time within that 777 structure. But we know Raphia and Peniam typify something that's still future, like midnight in the midnight cry. And so we we have made an application of the midnight cry at different times within our lines where we're zoomed into these events, right, that have happened within this movement. Okay. But we know that there is a waymark in the future called midnight and the midnight cry that are going to be part of that line that Jeff had in 2016. So the line that Jeff had in 2016, 9/11, midnight cry, Sunday law. In that line, we aren't to midnight yet, right?
Right.
So we're not to raffia. But when we've done our application, we have made this application more zoomed in rather than zoomed out. And, so I don't know whether we should, refine that more and explain it in some ways. But that's how we've looked at the present truth application. It's always focused upon what's happening in this movement. That is, in our document where we have stuff in red, it has to do with the movement itself in connection with what's happening in the world. But we haven't drawn it out to a broader application when we deal with it in the present truth application. We say that broader application is seen later in Daniel. So I'm still not quite sure how to address that. I think as time goes on, when I start putting this more in writing, we're going to have to come back to it and discuss it again. But so that's where I have a problem. We have a Raphaean Paneum that we have applied. November 9th, 2019, July 18, 2020. That's where we predicted the pandemic and all these things that have happened.
Right.
But now we know that there still is a Raphaean Paneum that's future. And maybe it's just now we can't see it until those events occur. But we know that what's happening in the movement is typifying what's going to happen. It is the wokeism that happened with Parminder's group is going to represent what's going to happen with Seventh-day Adventist Church, for instance. And we see that already beginning to happen.
Comment, Kelly?
It was just amen. Like that
Okay.
is happening within our church. It is happening.
Yeah, which was really surprising because back in 2019, when this was happening with Parminder's movement, then in 2020, didn't it happen with the church? Didn't the church soon follow afterwards, supporting BLM and wokeism, right? That it wasn't doing in 2019.
And one that really got people going was their support of the.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, but we saw this. It was a progression that happened, and so the church shortly after followed the example of Parminder and Tess. Not that they knew that they were, but yeah, they basically were in line with it. Yeah, the pandemic, of course, is a huge thing dealing with that. The church supporting the mandates.
Okay. Smith continues, but they shall fall. Some refer to this as to those mentioned in the first part of the verse, who should stand up against the king of the south. Others to the robbers of Daniel's people, the Romans. It is true in either case. If those who combined against Ptolemy are referred to, all that need be said is that they did speedily fall. And if it applies to the Romans, the prophecy simply looked forward to the period of their overthrow. I don't see a great issue with this statement. Any thoughts?
Yeah. So, but they shall fall. So, yeah, I think it has to be to the Romans that it's being talked about, that they are the ones that fall. I wouldn't apply it to anyone else.
Okay. Verse 15. So the king of the north shall come and cast up a mount, and take the most fenced cities. And the arms of the south shall not withstand, neither his chosen people, neither shall there be any strength to withstand. Now, in the past, when we looked at this, the margin readings would have rendered the verse in this manner. So the king of the north shall come and cast up a mount, and take the city of munitions, and the arms of the south shall not withstand, neither the people of his choices, neither shall there be any strength to withstand. And shall there be any is italicized, so this is added in this verse. Any thoughts or comments on this particular passage at this point?
Yeah, so as you point out, we looked at this passage quite a bit differently.
Yes.
So the king of the north, being Antiochus III, the USA, shall come. And this is the Battle of Paneum mentioned again, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to say that this is November 9th, 1989. What we're doing is we're comparing Raphia being 1798 and Paneum being 1989. So we're making that application in Daniel 11 verse 40b, right? And cast up amount. There's this economic and military pressure. This siege, this casting of amount is a siege. And take the most fenced cities. Now, we applied that then to the apostate Protestant churches, right? That's going to be about what happened with in that battle of taking of Judea and Sidon. And the arms of the south, we apply then to the Soviet Union and Egypt under Ptolemy V. Atheistic communism shall not withstand and stand up. So shall not stand up. That is, they're going to lose the Battle of Paneum on November 9th, 1989. And neither his chosen people is what the King James says, but there is nothing about neither his. It's just the people of his choice. And so there isn't a negative, a neither, because the neither is later, neither shall there be any strength to withstand. And I'm not even sure. This verse we need to look at again. So this is part of the thing that's, we deal with Raphia and Paneum, and we make an application to November 9th, 2019, and to July 18, 2020. And then when we get to verse 15, we kind of jump back to our history. And that's where I'm having troubles with this. I got to think this through. I haven't, to me, we're being a bit inconsistent. But there was a number of things here in this verse. For instance, the arms of the south, H2220 plus H5045 equals 7265, which that number is 19.89 years. So if you take that as a period of time, and then it's going to have a remainder of 4.26 hours. So a symbol of the 26th day of the fourth month. So we have the 1989 symbol and that symbol for Josiah Litch's prophecy that gives us the 26th day of the fourth month, which gave us July 18th, 2020. So, I mean, we're going to have to look, right now we're just looking at Uriah Smith. I don't know if we want to go deeply into the present truth application, because I think we have to come back to this again, as I said later, when I start working through the paper, then, I'll kind of run this by everybody. But I do think we have to make the present truth application somewhere into the immediate part within the movement. But we also have to look at this broader aspect. So I think both are correct, but I think I'm mixing them up too much together, or we are, in how we address that. But we need to see that one is typifying the other. Yeah, so I'm not really sure what to do with that. So I'm not happy with it, I guess, is what I'm saying. But because I think verse 15, the way that we connect that to 1989 is really solid. I think where I feel uncomfortable is with verse 14. I mean, we can make an application to our history, but I don't think that would be the direct present truth application, that we would need to broaden it out a bit more. So, we have 1989. Anyway, I don't want to go into the present truth too much yet, unless people think that we need to. I think we're just looking at what Uriah Smith is saying. That's what we're trying to do right now.
Okay.
So one thing that Uriah Smith doesn't do is he doesn't mention the Battle of Paneum directly.
No.
He mentions Raphia, but he's describing the Battle of Paneum, but he's not going to mention it as a word, right? As a title. So it's one of those things that was kind of hidden to our understanding. We have to sort of dig that up to get, this is the Battle of Paneum. give it a name. I don't know why he doesn't name it as such, because other commentators do. They recognize that.
Okay. The tuition of the young king of Egypt was entrusted by the Roman Senate to M. Aemilius Lepidus, who appointed Aristomenes, an old and experienced minister of that court, as his guardian. His first act was to provide against the threatened invasion of the two confederated kings, Philip and Antiochus. To this end, he dispatched Scopas, a famous general of Aetolia, then in the service of the Egyptians, into his native country to raise reinforcements for the army. Having equipped an army, he marched into Palestine and Coal Syria, or Hollow Syria, Antiochus being engaged in a war with Attalus in Lesser Asia, and reduced all Judea into subjection to the authority of Egypt. Now, is there something odd that we're seeing in this, the way that this is written?
Well, there's some typos, because it should be Coal Syria with an O instead of an A, and Antiochus instead of what you have there. And the Aetolia is got a capital E there that shouldn't be there. Aetolia. Not sure why they did that. So you can correct those typos.
Okay.
But that's sort of beside the point. I don't think that's what you were asking about, was it?
No, it's quite not, but that's okay.
So the thing that I notice, I'm not sure what it is you're noticing, but when I think about the confederation, so remember in Isaiah chapter 7, we have the confederacy. It's the king of the north, right, that's going to be confederate. The northern kingdom is going to be confederate. That's the civil war that starts the beginning of the prophetic mirror. And then we have, at the end of the prophetic mirror, we have confederation is in the south, right? The south is confederate. So here in this one, we're going to have the confederation again in the north, right? The king of the north is confederate. But there is, the papacy is supporting king of the south, right? So you got Rome taking this young king of Egypt and supporting the king of the south. So I'm not sure, how we address that, because it's kind of like there's two confederacies here. I mean, Rome is in a sense confederate with Egypt, and then we have this king of Macedon, who's confederate with Antiochus. So you got these two different confederacies, and I don't know how we would relate that then to the confederacies at the beginning and end of the prophetic mirror. Do they typify both of them? In the sense here, both are confederate?
Okay.
I don't know.
Well, what I'm looking at, first, as he states, M. Aemilius Lepidus appoints Aristomenes. So we do have these Latin Romans that are now fully vested in the care of this infant king in Egypt.
Mm-hmm.
But the Roman Aristomenes sends Scopas, a famous general of Aetolia. And what are we referring to when we're saying Aetolia?
I don't know. We looked at this before, but I don't remember.
The reason that I'm asking the question in this way, I was led last night to start going through Smith's articles on Daniel 8. And when he's referencing Aetolia, he's referencing Greece.
Yeah, it is Greece.
So
yeah, the mountainous region of Greece, right?
Okay.
North of the Gulf of Corinth.
So in this situation, we have the Romans employing a Greek against other Greeks that are trying to take over Egypt.
Mm-hmm.
So it seemed just a little different to me, a little odd, because within 9 years of this battle, because this is the battle that's occurring in 200 BC. By 191 BC, the Romans are going to defeat the Greeks.
Yeah. But it says here in Wikipedia the Aetolians allied with the Romans while Philip V destroyed the temple of Apollo, Thermius, and allied with the Carthaginians. And the Aetolians continued to fight on the side of the Romans, even in the Battle of Thyanocephalae in 196 BC, ignoring the great dangers looming for Greece. As a result of this alliance, the Aetolians took the side of Antiochus III against the Roman Republic, and on the defeat of that monarch in 189 BC, they became virtually the subjects of Rome.
Right.
Right. Following the conquest of the Achaeans by Lucius Mummius Achaicus in 146 BC, Aetolia became part of the Roman province of Achaia. Right. So obviously, their alliance isn't in their best interest.
Right.
So they may have felt, being aligned with Rome, even though they're taken over by Rome, they become part of the Roman Empire. I mean, it's really because Rome develops into this empire by making these alliances, right? Not necessarily by just destroying people in war. And people are happy to do it because they benefit from it. So maybe it was in their best interest, not as independents, like Greeks, but as, for the people themselves in that area. I don't know. Right. So, but yeah, you notice this, that I'm not sure how we apply that. Now, the scriptures itself isn't addressing this alliance with Aetolia. This is just something that happens historically. It's not part of that story per se in the scriptures. So I don't know if we need to make an application of it. But what we could say, if we were going to make an application, is that the papacy has allied itself with aspects of the globalists, right?
Okay.
But here, in this case, we're looking at the king of the north, that is Syria, the Seleucid Empire, as typifying the power that we would call, apostate Protestantism. Now, it is Greece in a sort of sense, because it's a division of Greece, but it's representing, the king of the north is representing republicanism, and the king of the south is representing the Democrats, right? If we do it that way, or we could say, in a broader sense, apostate Protestantism and globalism, right?
Right.
So there is these multiple alliances of different factions or different aspects of these kingdoms that do parallel what we see happening as these events unfold in this threefold union developing.
Okay.
Remind me of the present day threefold union you're seeing, Theodore.
Well, the threefold union of the dragon, the beast, and the false prophet.
Yeah, in the present day application you're seeing.
Well, so what we're seeing right now is we see all these different powers that appear to be in opposition to each other, but various types of alliances occurring on different levels, right? So apostate Protestants allies with the papacy, to overthrow the Soviet Union, but still, the papacy is going to align with the UN, which is the one that inherits that aspect of the king of the south, right? And so there's all these little alliances going on as people are jockeying for position, but it's all going to end up in a threefold union united against God's people, right? So we see this type of thing happening here with this battle over the land of Palestine, right? The Levant, part of what's happening. You have this king of the north and the king of the south. The reason why they're called north and south is because those are the two enemies of Israel. This is from the perspective of the land of Israel. That's why it's called the King of the North and the King of the South. Not so much because of which territory was conquered, right? Because Uriah Smith was kind of saying, well, it's whoever has the North is the King of the North. Whoever has that initial kingdom, but Assyria is actually the East. So it didn't really make any sense. Anyway, you get what I'm saying here, is that this is typifying that battle at the end of the world. The King of the North and the King of the South are those enemies of Israel, and that's what's going to happen at the end of the world, that we see in this battle between the King of the North and the King of the South in Daniel 11, verse 40 to 45. That ultimately everybody comes against God's people at the end of the world.
The beast, beast, the dragon, and the false prophet unite against God's people, Israel being symbolic of God's people in the last days.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
The land of Israel.
And what are those? The beast, the dragon, and the false prophet are the papacy,
the UN, and the USA.
UN and the USA. Okay. Nailed that.
Okay, good. Glad I could be of help.
Okay. So now Smith continues. Thus affairs were brought into a posture for the fulfillment of the verse before us. For Antiochus, desisting from his war with Attalus at the dictation of the Romans, took speedy steps for the recovery of Palestine and Syria from the hands of the Egyptians. It should be Scopus, not Scopes. That's a different kind of a trial. Scopus was sent to oppose him. Near the sources of the Jordan, the two armies met. Scopus was defeated, pursued to Sidon, and there closely besieged. 3 of the ablest generals of Egypt, with their best forces, were sent to raise the siege, but without success. At length, Scopus, meeting in the gaunt and intangible specter of famine, a foe with whom he was unable to cope, was forced to surrender on dishonorable terms of life only. Whereupon he and his 10,000 men were suffered to depart stripped and naked. Here was the taking of the most fenced cities by the king of the north, for Sidon was, both in its situation and its defenses, one of the strongest cities of those times. Here was the failure of the arms of the south to withstand, and the failure also of the people which the king of the south had chosen, namely Scopus and his Aetolian forces. Now, Smith,
wait, I didn't see where you were reading. Is it on where you're reading? Just
yes.
Put your cursor where you finished reading.
Put my cursor right there.
Okay. Okay. Good. Thanks.
You bet. Smith has concluded his portion then on verse 15. He goes into verse 16. But he that cometh against him shall do according to his own will, and none shall stand before him. And he shall stand in the glorious land, which by his hand shall be consumed. So,
I find that interesting that they were stripped and naked. It's almost like that's what will happen for Laodicea.
That's what has to happen with Laodicea.
Right.
Although Egypt could not stand before Antiochus, the king of the north, Antiochus could not stand before the Romans who now came against him. No kingdoms were longer able to resist this rising power. Syria was conquered and added to the Roman Empire when Pompey, BC 65, deprived Antiochus Asiaticus of his possessions and reduced Syria to a Roman province. So, since the founding of Rome, it's interesting to see how the Roman progression has come about. In 217 BC, we have Raphia. In 200, we have Panium. Now we're coming in down to BC 665, and we are seeing Rome as master of this area. The same power was also to stand in the Holy Land and consume it. Rome became connected with the people of God, the Jews, by alliance in BC 161, from which date it holds a prominent place in the prophetic calendar. It did not, however, acquire jurisdiction over Judea by actual conquest until BC 63, and then in the following manner. On Pompey's return from his expedition against Mithridates, king of Pontus, two competitors, Hyrcanus and Aristobulus, were struggling for the crown of Judea. Their cause came before Pompey, who soon perceived the injustice of the claims of Aristobulus, but wished to defer decision in the matter till after his long-coveted expedition into Arabia, promising then to return and settle their affairs, as should seem just and proper. Aristobulus, fathoming Pompey's real sentiments, hastened back to Judea, armed his subjects, and prepared for a vigorous defense, determined at all hazards to keep that crown which he foresaw would be adjudicated to another. Pompey closely...
So, to comment on this first. So we have, just go back a bit.
Okay.
If you can.
Certainly.
Yeah, so this Hyrcanus and Aristobulus. So this is that issue that's happening. So we have this alliance, of course, 161 is where he dates it. But we know that there's 161 and 158. There's a 3-year period from when this league, the Roman Jewish League, first occurs to when it goes into effect. So he's describing sort of how it's going to go into effect. It's going to have to do with Hyrcanus being supported. But I know Stephen is the one that's kind of the expert on this history. He spent a lot of time on it and establishing that we also have 158 BC. And there's a lot of confusion regarding this, like historically and within Adventism, those who try to go to the present truth application, or not the present truth application, but those that believe in the historical application as understood by Miller, right? So we're going to be going back to the past. We're going to support Miller in 158 BC. So I don't know if Uriah Smith quite gets this right, though. Now, he's not going to give us the date 158 BC, but there is this Hyrcanus. I'm trying to remember. I can't remember all the details. I wish Stephen was here, because he would just be able to explain it to us straight away. But I know it has to do with the support that's going on there now basically against Greece. So yeah. So now this would be John Hyrcanus. Would it be, or would it be Hyrcanus II? Yeah, this would be Hyrcanus. I'm trying to figure out which person this would be, because this is all explained in Josephus explains this stuff. Also in Maccabees, Second Maccabees. I wish I remembered this history better. I always get really confused in this history because of the names of people.
Okay, but Hyrcanus II died in 30 BC in Jerusalem.
Yeah, so this would be John Hyrcanus.
They're okay.
No, it wouldn't be him either. So which Hyrcanus is this?
Because John Hyrcanus II.
Yeah, not that one.
He was briefly king of Judea from 67 to 66 BC, and was ethnarch of Judea possibly during the period of 47 to 40 BC.
Yeah, it's not the second, it's the first one. So John Hyrcanus the first. He was born 175 BC and died 104 BC. Was the high priest and ruler of the Jewish nation. So I don't know if that makes sense. He wouldn't fit in with that timeline. So it's got to be some other Hyrcanus. Yeah, I wish Stephen was here. I'm going to try to look this up and sort this out, because I really want to understand this history of this Roman Jewish League. Because what Uriah Smith is presenting here doesn't resonate with me that this is really the issue.
It doesn't fit.
Yeah. It does. There's something wrong here. That's yeah. But I can't say what it is, right? Because I just don't know it well enough. But I know Stephen does. He understands it. But if I work it out myself, then I understand it. Then there'll be two of us that understand it.
Okay.
We kind of need to work some of these things out ourselves in order to get them in our heads, right? We can hear somebody say it. Yeah, Kelly says perhaps draw a line. I think that's what I really need to do, is to kind of put this on the line. Of course, like next week, I'm not going to be here for a couple of the studies, and then I'll be back in Alberta next Thursday. So I'll be back there for the study all set up like I used to be, Lord willing, that I get back. So we need to sort this out at some point, so that we got it simple. It's on a line. It's understandable. Some of these details. But yeah, this doesn't make sense to me. That is, the verse itself, when we're addressing this verse, this is verse 16, right?
Correct.
Yeah. But he that cometh against him shall do according to his will, and none shall stand before him, and he shall stand in the glorious land, which by his hand shall be consumed. So here he's introducing this alliance, which I don't think we normally place it here in this verse. Where do we normally place it? Now, the other thing here is that he shall do according to his own will. This is going to be Rome, right?
Right.
How is he doing this? Because when we have somebody do according to his own will, it's introducing this new power. Greece did according to his own will, right? That is Alexander. And we have different. So here, he that cometh against him is Rome, right? And shall do according to his own will. So that's the Roman power. None shall stand before him. He shall stand in the glorious land. I guess that's where we're saying when he stands in the glorious land, that's the Roman Jewish League, right?
Right.
Which by his hand shall be consumed. Okay, that makes sense now. So he stands in the glorious land. We would mark that as 158.
Right.
And then we have 666 years inclusive to 508. That's what Miller did. So that's how he applied the 666. Yeah. So what he's saying here, I mean, he's kind of got things mixed up. Like it's just kind of jumble. Okay. So anyway, go on. Just me trying to sort all this out.
Okay. So to reread this part of it, Aristobulus, fathoming Pompey's real sentiments, hastened back to Judea, armed his subjects, and prepared for a vigorous defense, determined at all hazards to keep that crown which he foresaw would be adjudicated to another. Pompey closely followed the fugitive. As he approached Jerusalem, Aristobulus, beginning to repent of his course, came out to meet him and endeavored to accommodate matters by promising entire submission and large sums of money. Pompey, accepting this offer, sent Gabinius at the head of a detachment of soldiers to receive the money. But when that lieutenant general arrived at Jerusalem, he found the gates shut against him, and was told from the top of the walls that the city would not stand to the agreement. Pompey, not to be deceived in this way with impunity, put Aristobulus, whom he had retained with him, in irons, and immediately marched against Jerusalem with his whole army. The partisans of Aristobulus were for defending the place. Those of Hyrcanus were for opening the gates. The latter being in the majority and prevailing, Pompey was given free entrance into the city. Whereupon the adherents of Aristobulus retired to the mountain of the temple as fully determined to defend that place, as Pompey was to reduce it. At the end of 3 months, a breach was made in the wall sufficient for an assault. and the place was carried at the point of the sword. In the terrible slaughter that ensued, 12,000 persons were slain. It was an affecting sight, observes the historian, to see the priests engaged at the time in divine service pursue with calm hand and steady purpose their accustomed work, apparently unconscious of the wild tumult, though all around them their friends were being given to the slaughter, and though often their own blood mingled with that of their sacrifices. So it's kind of interesting that this situation was occurring.
Yeah, and this is Hyrcanus II that's being talked about here.
Right.
Yeah, so this is a later time. So when you look at verse 16, he that cometh against him shall do according to his own will. So that's Rome asserting itself.
Right.
It's now beginning. That's going to be 158 BC, and none shall stand before him. He shall stand also in the glorious land. I guess in him standing in the glorious land is 158 BC. And which by his hand shall be consumed, that's 63 BC.
Okay.
Right? So there's that whole history from the Maccabean rebellion all the way up to the destruction, well, not destruction, but the siege of Jerusalem in 63 BC. And what we show is that when we went through this before, is that this Roman Jewish League, everything is explained in what happens to Israel. So they make this league, and then we're going to see unfolding the results of that league that end in the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD, right?
Right.
That is, it gets to verse 22, with the arms of the flood shall they be overflown from before him, and he shall be broken, yea, also the prince of the covenant. And after the league made with him, he shall work deceitfully, for he shall come up and shall be strong with a small people, right? So it's going to introduce this Roman Jewish League, right, that they stand in the glorious land. It's going to describe the results of that league, and then it's going to go back and address the league again in verse 23, right? So if that makes sense. So that's how we had sorted it out before, that there's a repeat and enlarge, right? They introduce something, and then they show the results of it.
Okay.
And then it's going to get into, then it's going to go back again and address the fall of Egypt, dealing with Antony and Cleopatra, right? Happens there. So now I remember how we did that. And then it's going to, of course, you're going to have that whole history described of Rome, and then leading up to the papacy. Okay. So that was where the problem was, because we normally just would look at the Roman Jewish League in verse 23, right? And of course Uriah Smith does that as well. Rome makes a league with the Jews in 1123. That's going to be his subheading. So, but it's mentioned also in verse 16, but more obliquely, right? It doesn't refer to the league as such. So it's going to talk about what's going to happen, and then it describes what's going to happen, and the end result of it. So yeah, there's lots of detail here, and it's good to be going through this again in the historical application. We'll look at the present truth application later on. But.
Okay. Now, the final paragraph of this section. Having put an end to the war, Pompey demolished the walls of Jerusalem, transferred several cities from the jurisdiction of Judea to that of Syria, and imposed tribute on the Jews. Thus, for the first time was Jerusalem placed by conquest in the hands of that power which was to hold the glorious land in its iron grasp till utterly consumed. So that's Smith's viewpoint on this portion. Any
Yeah.
thoughts on this last paragraph?
Yeah. So that's going to obviously be 70 AD,
Right?
right? So when they're utterly consumed. And that's the result of the Roman Jewish League. So it's going to describe that now in more detail in the following verses, right? It's going to go all the way back to what Rome does and how it ends up with this Roman Jewish League and then the destruction of Jerusalem. So there is this repeat and enlarge within Daniel chapter 11. Now, most people, like most commentators, Protestant commentators, especially the preterists, they're going to try to apply all of this to Greece. That is, when you look at these verses, it's not going to be about Rome. It's still going to be about Greece. But we have passed to Rome, just as we did from Medo-Persia to Alexander, skipping a lot of that history, right?
Okay.
Like, we're not going to be looking at Antiochus Epiphanes in here.
No.
Right? Because Rome is already there. So now we're concerned with Rome. Just like, we had Xerxes, there's this battle against Greece that he's going to lose, and then Alexander the Great's the next one that does according to his own will. So in verse 16, we now have Rome. We don't have, Antiochus Epiphanes, because that's who they're going to have that does according to his own will, is Antiochus Epiphanes, right? You look at other commentaries. Let me see here if I can wonder where they. I would have to look at some of these other commentaries. Anyway, so we know that our view is different. Just looking at these different commentaries, yeah, because they're going to get Antiochus Epiphanes in verse 21. So they're going to have, and they're still going to have in this history. They're going to have Antiochus the third. And then when they get to verse 21, they have Antiochus the fourth, which is Antiochus Epiphanes. So they're going to have him be the vile person, but we're going to have that vile person be Tiberius. Right. So quite a divergence occurs in these verses between those that believe that Antiochus Epiphanes is the one that defiles the temple, and those that see that all being actually Rome and coming against the Prince of Princes and so forth, all those things. Yeah, the Prince of the Covenant, right? So in verse 11, verse 22, the Prince of the Covenant we take as Christ, but those that have Antiochus Epiphanes, they say, oh, the Prince of the Covenant, that's the priest, the high priest. So it's a lot of differences here. But so Uriah Smith is following, generally what correctly. He's got Rome here, and Rome is the one that's going to stand in the glorious land. So this is going to bring us to 63 BC, and which by his hand shall be consumed is 70 AD.
Okay.
So that period of 132 years is spanned in that one verse, the last half of that verse. Okay, so I guess Sunday, I should be able to join in on Sunday and Monday. Tuesday and Wednesday next week I won't, and then Thursday I'll be back home. So on Sunday, Monday, I guess, what are we going to be covering?
Well, we're going to have the portion to start with verse 17 to 20 from these articles, and setting the stage for some of the rest of what we're going to be doing after that.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
So, good.
What can I ask? What articles is it still in review in Herald?
Yes. Yeah.
So
Well,
is that in 1970? I mean 1870. Excuse me.
we're going to be dealing with an article starting from 24th of January of 1871.
Oh, 71. Okay.
And this one will have the interesting portion that on the biblical date, it was the second day of the 11th month of the biblical year 5915. So 211 And it's going to be that way on the rabbinic calendar and also the Islamic calendar. So this is going to be one of those that's going to have some other import for us to consider. Any other thought or questions at this time? Okay, shall we then close with prayer? Gracious Father in heaven, we thank you for this time of study that you have given us this week. We thank you for this ability we've had to assemble together. We praise you for the ideas that you are bringing to our minds and helping us to understand. Be with us each one today. Guide us until we can assemble again. For this, Father, we thank you. For this, we praise you. In Jesus' name, amen.